Welcome back to another episode of Endurance Icons. I am your host, Mark Cullen, just solo today as Jess is living the corporate life today. So she's not going to be joining us today, but we got an awesome guest for you and one that through Instagram we've had a bunch of requests for. So excited to have Ben Preisner, Canadian distance runner and Canada's top finisher at the most recent Olympic marathon in Tokyo. Also, make sure to give Ben a follow on Strava and Instagram. He's a great follow on there. You can see all of his epic training on there. So definitely been enjoying watching his journey for the last number of years and excited to chat through all of the things that have gone on in his career and where he's going in the future. So welcome, Ben. Pumped to have you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's funny. I'm curious to see who the requests are coming from, but no, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to discuss all endurance.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll keep those anonymous. I'm sure they'll come out of the woodwork on Instagram and YouTube comments when it's time. They'll be all pumped up.
There you go.
Love it. So one thing we like to ask our guests is what was on the training schedule for you today?
Yeah, today was actually a bit of an easier day. We had a big one, kind of a 35K interval session yesterday. So today was a bit of an easier one. I had 6 miles this morning, got another 6 miles this afternoon, but it's mainly just keep it easy, let the legs recover, and get ready for the training this week.
So as someone who's followed your Strava for a while, I noticed earlier this year you were ramping up a bunch early in the year, but looked like you had a bit of a blip on the radar. Run us through maybe what the prep was going into this year and maybe what kind of transpired in the early part of the year.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a weird spring. Something I haven't really dealt with, honestly, in the bulk of my elite level of running, for sure. I had one little injury in high school, but then other than that, knock on wood, I've been pretty good so far. But yeah, I was gearing up for the Tokyo Marathon, which was meant to be in March of this year. But I think it was about 3 weeks before. Things were going really well, training really hard, and it was basically hit my last really long session, and then just something started to mess with me on my knee. And like I said, I've never really dealt with it before. It's usually like if I get something, it's okay. I'll wait a couple of days and it'll ease off, and I'll be able to get back into training and all that. But it only seemed to get worse and escalate the more I tried to run on it. So yeah, I had to make the call to pull the plug on Tokyo Marathon, and yeah, the bumpy road didn't really end there either. I kind of took some time off, got in to see some specialists to try and figure out what it is, and it kind of subsided. I probably more just off of time, but I did get some treatment for some really good physios and massage therapists as well. But so I thought I was in the clear, back to training, got a good 4-week block going into the Prague Marathon, which is kind of the backup. I had 2 of my training partners running that. So everything was good. Training was back to full swing of things and pretty confident going into it. Basically, as soon as I landed in Prague, I got another flare up in the knee. So it was kind of the sign that the season was just not meant to be. It meant to be little bit of mental conditioning, if anything. And yeah, so I don't know. Things are back in the swing now. I'm back into full training and just got to get fit now.
So when you look back on it, what were you maybe like in uncharted territories doing like workouts you hadn't before? Were you in like a mileage territory you hadn't been before when you were there? It was just kind of a weird one. What do you kind of chalk it up to?
No, there really wasn't anything that I think was like, that one, I pushed it over the edge doing that one there. I mean, I was up in Flagstaff, Arizona, training pretty hard, and that definitely beats up on the body. Recovery gets exponentially harder the farther you go up in elevation and all that, and the longer you're there. So I think it was just kind of the compound of the spring. Obviously there's high stakes this year and going into next year, and so everyone's trying to push the envelope a little bit more and more. And I think I found my line, or at least my knee found the line. So it kind of gives a little bit of perspective into what my body can handle and what I need to do in order to mitigate anything in the future. So yeah, that's kind of the lessons learned, I guess, from this spring.
Hey man, it's a good lesson for athletes is sometimes you can do everything perfect and be nailing everything and it can just go off the rails when you least expect it. It can be a frustrating sport when you're riding that edge for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's endurance sports for sure. We have this nature of we're do the exact same thing for hours on end. So you can only imagine the kind of buildup and fatigue that, muscles, tendons, bones, everything deals with on a day-to-day basis. So, so you got to expect something's going to happen eventually. And it's just a matter of, can you prolong it as long as possible, or can you minimize the effect of what it's happening?
Yeah, it's too bad you missed out on Tokyo. That ended up being a pretty exciting race. Did you end up tuning into it and watching Cam throw down there?
Yeah, for sure. It's obviously definitely had some FOMO watching that
Yeah.
race, and he absolutely smashed it out of the park, and he's been smashing it out of the park. So super happy for him, and definitely wish I was on the line with him there. But I'm sure we'll cross paths again in not too distant future.
Yeah, no doubt. That's cool. He's paving the way for the rest of you guys to just pull down there too and make Canada a force in distance running. So it's super exciting. So what are you tuning up for? I've noticed you've had a pretty good build going the last little while on Strava. What are you kind of building up for coming up?
Yeah, so right now we've just been kind of consistently building since the little setback in Prague, and like I said, no injury setbacks. So it's just a matter of like getting back into the grind, getting the body used to just the volume on the legs and all that. So we've been building back up, and the next race is going to be the next big race, I should say, is going to be World Championships in Budapest. I'll be in the marathon there. And, I think we've got a local 10K here, just more of a workout, if anything, kind of get the legs moving a little bit, get the competitive spirit going. And then, yeah, so the build is on for World Champs, and we're kind of in the thick of it right now.
Nice. And what's the date for that race?
It's the 27th of August. You caught me there. I'm pretty sure it's whatever that Sunday is. I think it's the 27th. Yeah. So I think we're just about 6.5 weeks out from today.
Nice. Into the bulk of it. And has Canada selected its full team for the marathon for men and women? Who's joining you?
Yeah. So it's kind of the fortunate part of being in the marathon side. They select a little bit earlier, which makes sense because our builds are a lot longer for one race rather than the track folk. But it's going to be Royer Linkletter is the one Canadian, and Justin Kent is the other. So I trained with Justin, so it's kind of
that's awesome.
Works pretty well that we get to basically do the entire build together in prep for Budapest.
Nice, exciting. Cool. Before we hop into, I want to dive into a bunch of your training stuff and these staples that have kind of got you to where you are, but maybe let's turn the clock back a bit and kind of take it from the start. So maybe tell us a little bit about your path to running. Like, what were you doing growing up sports wise? I know you grew up pretty close to me. I grew up kind of Markham area. I think you were out in like Oakville, Milton sort of area. So what was your path to running?
Yeah, you got that. I grew up in Milton, Ontario, and I've pretty much hit as many sports as I could, especially in elementary school. And the number of sports started to dwindle as I got older, especially through high school. But I think as a kid, hockey was definitely my main passion. I started skating when I was 3, started playing rep hockey when I was, I don't know, whatever you can in tyke, whatever age that is.
6 or 7 or something
yeah,
by the
exactly.
time you get there.
So, I played rep hockey all the way through grade 11, and it was an interesting introduction into the sport of running. I was mainly just doing it just for a fall sport, and because the way our school system worked in high school is you couldn't play high school hockey on the varsity team and play rep hockey in Milton.
Oh, really?
So yeah, there wasn't. So anyways, I was looking for another sport to do in high school, and I was like, running and fitness seems to work well together. So I'll do this sport, stay fit for hockey, and I don't know, have some fun while I'm at it. And I didn't really clue in that like the endurance side was definitely my forte, and it just kind of all spiraled from there. After my first couple of races in high school cross country, my high school coach was pretty keen on me keeping going and training hard, and then ended up joining a track club as well. So I think the roots that both my high school coaches, Jeff Holler and Maureen Norson, set really just kind of paved the way for what I was able to achieve in the last few years, and throughout my university career and high school career. So definitely owe a lot to them, to the roots of it all.
Cool. So you kind of got it started, it sounded like around like grade 9, then, but by the time you got to grade 12, you're like going on a scholarship to Tulsa. Like things must have escalated pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I would say even through grade 9, I was still much more keen on playing hockey than running. And it
The dream
was,
was alive still.
yeah, exactly. And, I had the perspective that I was playing double A at the time. It's not like I was going to the NHL. I knew that wasn't the thing, but it's been a passion of mine my whole life. So I thought, if I'm still enjoying it, why stop? But yeah, it's kind of those 4 years, grade 9 through grade 12, they slowly started to cross over in terms of what my passion was, and honestly what I could achieve. I was starting to plateau in hockey, as you probably know, if you hit grade 11, 12 and you're not moving up into the ranks, you're what are you going to do after that, right? So yeah, I would say probably like end of grade 10, early grade 11 is when it probably crossed over in terms of hockey became the side passion, and running became the pretty full-fledged sport that I was keen on doing. But while I was doing that, I was still playing soccer and even like house league baseball with my friends and stuff. So I tried to keep pretty diverse in my sports, and I think that actually helped me in the long run too.
Nice. And so what was your path kind of from grade 12 moving into Tulsa? Did you jump right into like just track like 5 and 10K sort of stuff, or what did you kind of jump to right away?
Yeah. So interestingly, I was a steeplechase specialist in high school,
Yes, the
and so
2K
that
steeplechase, right?
yeah,
I did it
exactly.
as
So
well.
that's what got me. It got me on my first two Team Canada's, actually, the World Youth Championships and World Junior Championships on the track. Youth was 2K, junior was 3K. And so that was kind of actually how one of the main reasons I was recruited to run at Tulsa was, I mean, my 3K steeple time in grade 12 was decently competitive in the NCAA at the time. So it kind of showed promise that I would be able to keep developing in the steeple. So my first couple of years at Tulsa, I would say at least 3 years, was mainly focused on the 3K steeple. Obviously, cross country was 10K, and that was the bulk of the fall season. But once that turned over to indoor track, I did the 3K 5, and the outdoor, I did mainly 5K steeplechase. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I didn't really progress in the steeple as much as I wanted. Definitely think I hit my stride running in high school, and I progressed a little bit, maybe 10 or 15 seconds in university, but definitely didn't see the jump that I was hoping to. And so I think that's what kind of pushed me into the longer stuff, the 10K 5K, near the end of my university career.
Nice. So you kind of went to 5 and 10K from there. So where was the next move to kind of road racing? It seems like you just kept bumping up in distance, where you just kind of every time you jump up to test it, you just kept finding success kind of thing, or what was the path there?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there. It's like it seemed to be, and has seemed to be, that every time I took a step up in distance, there seemed to be that next level that I was competing at. Like I said, I was World Juniors in steeple, and then I was able to progress into a senior team by the time I got to the marathon. So you can see the progression there. I still don't know if I love the track 10K. So that was kind of the interesting like intermediate years where I didn't have like fantastic success on the track 10K, but I think in the road 10K I was a lot more competitive. And honestly, just by the time I graduated, I didn't have the team around me. The whole track, circuit was not really that appealing to me, and so that's when I started to look on the roads. But to be completely honest, when I graduated university, I was not intending on continuing to run. I was pretty set on hanging up the shoes, at least competitively, and getting into the workforce. But things just kept ticking away, and I just kept registering for races, and one thing after another. It all kind of stemmed into this marathon thing that's been driving my last few years for sure.
We're glad you stuck with running, but if you hadn't gone in running, what career do you think you would have gone? What path?
Yeah, I got my bachelor's in chemical engineering, specializing in environmental engineering. So right out of university, I got a job offer for environmental engineering role at a big company, and it was that kind of, all right, I have this, but running was also still going okay, and uh, the other factor was the job was a different location than my girlfriend and I were currently living. So there was a whole lot of it, and it was that big debate on, okay, do I take this chance? At the time, Tokyo was 1 year away in 2019 before the postponement, but yeah, it was kind of a big gamble. It was a decently big gamble to turn down a job and say, all right, I'm gonna give this running thing a go.
So cool, man. Crazy how one little decision, how that could have changed the path of your life, though. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure. That's undoubtable.
So I feel like I kind of first saw your name from I think it was like a Canadian running article during COVID where you had gone out and ran like a solo 2:15 marathon. I think that might have been like your first marathon. Tell me about that. Was it just something to kill the COVID boredom? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, no, that was definitely an interesting one, which, yeah, it was the first time I run that full distance and first time I raced it, time trialed it in an essence. But yeah, the whole thing was, at the time, early 2020, I joined up with the current coach I have, Rich Lee, in the BC Endurance Project. And we were like, all right, well, we got one crack at it to try and make the Tokyo team, which was going to happen in 2020. So we kind of had our eyes set on the London Marathon, which was, April of 2020. So one of the first races to go down due to the pandemic. So we spent, I think, about 5 or 6 weeks up in Flagstaff from like early January through basically until the borders were going to get closed, like early March. So yeah, we had all this fitness and training was going well, and my coach was like, okay, you know what, we've got all this training, you've been doing all this practice with fluids, and like there's not really a downside with all these races being canceled for who knows how long, to just give it a go and see what works, see what doesn't, and practice some fueling, practice even just mental fortitude of running on a bike path for 40K, 42K by yourself. So yeah, it just kind of turned into this little time trial out in just outside Kingston, Ontario, 5K out and backs, so I could get my water on either side and carbs on either side. And yeah, it was kind of an interesting way to kill the time. Like you said, it was when there's not much going on, you can motivate yourself for some weird things.
Totally. And everyone's first marathon is always can sometimes be a bit of a roll of the dice. How did you end up like even splitting it, or did you fall apart a bit at the end? How did it end up panning out for you?
Yeah, no, we definitely knew that was definitely a possibility, especially because I was doing it. Yeah, my girlfriend, now my fiance, was on the bike for the most of it, handing me the bottles. So had her for moral support, but other than that, it was just me out there dealing with whatever was coming my way. So we intentionally went out slower than, we were training at the time to run 2:11:30 because that was the Olympic standard. So we went out considerably slower than that. I think I went out in about 68 minutes or something like that, and then was able to negative split on the second half. So that was the whole plan, was to see a gradual progression going in. And I think I succeeded in that. I don't think there was really a mile near the end that I dropped off too much. So yeah, it's pretty happy with it. And it definitely set some good confidence going into later in 2020 when I was actually going to take a crack at the standard.
Yeah, tell me about your kind of cracks to qualify for the Olympics, because I know you ended up running like 2:10 to qualify. What was kind of your path from there? You're riding this confidence after this 2:15 negative split debut marathon on a bike path. What was kind of the path to qualifying?
Yeah, it was, like everyone, you're scrambling to find a race. Every race you enter seems to get canceled. You're like, okay, well, do I fly to Europe and try and get into this random race and then have to deal with quarantine on the way home and all this stuff? So the logistics behind it was a bit of a nightmare. But there ended up being this little elite only race in Chandler, Arizona, just outside Phoenix. Definitely owe the race organizers a lot to make all that happen. And there's 50 men, 50 women that lined up, and it was just we all knew this was basically our one shot, because everything else is getting canceled around us, or just not even being put on at all. So yeah, I had the opportunity to run it, and the pace group was kind of perfect for it. So 2:10 it was. We went out in 2:09 pace, and Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the perfect day for me. Perfect weather. Things seemed to click. I felt fantastic for, at least 35K of it. The last 5K is always rough no matter
Yep.
how fast you're going, but yeah, it was just kind of one of those magical days, and couldn't really have asked for much more than to hit standard, be the first Canadian in a race, and kind of not officially punch my ticket, but essentially punch my ticket to the Tokyo team.
Amazing. So you run that 2:10. So when did you officially find out that you were kind of in for Tokyo? And tell me a bit about your Tokyo Olympic experience.
Yeah, the interesting part with the team naming process with Athletics Canada and like these big teams is that you kind of got to wait a while. So it wasn't until I think the end of May that we officially got like selection, because there were four of us that had standard and only three can go. So essentially the committee got to pick who they deemed would be the best option for them or for Team Canada to run at the Olympics. So yeah, the weird thing with that is, if you're thinking a standard marathon build of 16 weeks or 14 or 12 weeks even, you're into the marathon build before you're actually officially selected to the team, which is a very weird thing to cope with mentally when you're trying to put in these big workouts. You're like, what's this even for? I'm not even on this team yet. Like they're probably not going to select me. You have all those thoughts. So definitely an interesting aspect of marathon training and how the team's being named. But got the call and got to go, and obviously one of the biggest accomplishments of my running career for sure. I would say the biggest accomplishment of my running career for sure.
So far, anyways.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, then the build is on really. The biggest aspect of the Tokyo Marathon was definitely the heat that we were going to be dealing with, because it was, high 20s and probably 28 or 29 degrees Celsius and 85-90% humidity at the start line. And that was at 8 a.m. And, we were running for 2+ hours. So it got pretty spicy out there. And so it was, what kind of nutrition do we need? What kind of, tactics in terms of cooling are we going to use? Like ice vest before, and grabbing little ice packets mid race, and switching out hats that had cold water dunked in them. We were doing a whole lot of stuff, just try and survive that race, because I think that was kind of the name of the game. It was a name of the game was basically attrition. How long can you make it before you hit that wall? Because I think pretty much everyone except for Kipchoge hit a wall. So yeah.
So what were some of those things you did for like heat prep in the lead up? Did you do anything that you hadn't done before?
Yeah, I think, not shying away from running in the heat, especially during easy runs, but, also making sure that the key marathon sessions are done in the heat, or at least close to the heat, just so that you actually have that data point on what pace is sustainable before you start to really feel it. Because, you can, even on the day in Tokyo, the first 10K felt like it was an absolute jog, even though we were intentionally going out very slow. You get that like false sense of security. You're like, oh, this isn't bad at all. Like I could do this for ages. It's just that it very quickly accumulates on you. So yeah, hitting those long workouts in the heat, and even incorporating a little bit of sauna in the training sessions, or like immediately after training sessions, helps build up those heat acclimators as well. So there's a couple things like that. But then also on the just cooling side, I know our physiologists were basically telling us, if we can keep our core body temp slightly lower, it's not like it's going to stop our body temp from getting up high, but it'll delay that process. So if we can push that, max heat by 20-30 minutes, that's, a good chunk of the race that we're able to survive a little bit longer and not really start to feel it. So yeah, there's a lot of different tactics that work for different people.
Awesome. So how did the actual race play out for you? Did you end up was it a pretty even race, or did the heat finally get you? I know a guy like Cam, I think he had ran like front pack for a while, and then I think he went backwards pretty quickly. Did you feel like you executed pretty well on the day?
I think I executed okay. There was definitely some aspect of it that I we had this plan. I actually don't off the top of my head remember exactly what pace we were trying to hit. I think it was about 307s or 308s maybe, which on a perfect day should have been pretty conservative for me. So it was an intentional go out slow and try and pick people off as they start to die. But you're getting that hype on the start line. You got a big group of people, and there's really not that many athletes on the start line of that race versus, if you go to a major marathon, you're running with thousands of people. You only have in your group maybe 10 people, but in the entire race, I think there was about 85 or 90 that started. So it's a pretty small field, and you feel kind of awkward if you're sitting 50 meters off the last pack. So I definitely got dragged into going a little bit harder than I wanted, and I definitely paid the price for it. I knew it was going to come eventually. You can't just imagine that you're never going to feel the heat. I'm sure there are some people that are just maniacs like that, but that is definitely not me. So yeah, it was definitely a process of like not getting overwhelmed with the impending thought that you're going to hit this wall, but also accepting that it's going to happen and figuring out what you're going to do about it. Whether you're going to cave or whether you're going to really push through it.
Yeah, I think anybody can resonate with that. You're in the biggest friggin' race in the world, and you're a little fired up. You want to be in the mix, not the person who played it safe and go easy on it, even if that is maybe the right tactic on it.
Yeah, exactly. And you got all these doubts. You're like, well, all these other guys are running, they have the same PB as me, and they're running a couple seconds per K faster than me. Like, why can't I hang with them? But we all mutually died pretty hard. So I think, lesson learned, but also you have to be in the race too. You can't play the tactical game every single time. So I wouldn't say I have any regrets, but definitely a lesson learned, and give some more data points on what's feasible. If you're going in at a certain fitness, how much percentage you're likely going to need to take off your pace in order to account for the heat.
So growing up, were you someone who like always wanted to go to an Olympics, whether it was like when you were like a younger kid or once you had got into running? Was that always a dream of yours or not really?
It's kind of funny. You want to hear all that story, or it's like, oh, I've been dreaming about this for 50 years, but or whatever, 20 years. But I loved watching the Olympics. I always watched hockey and all the different sports. Half the sports I have no idea what's going on, especially in the Winter Olympics. But I wouldn't say it was ever really a goal of mine, mainly because honestly, my times as I was progressing through the distances in track, I just wasn't competitive at that level yet. Um, I think I have a pretty good ability to kind of take a step back and put things in perspective. And like, I know when I ran 29 flat or whatever I ran, whatever my PB was in university, like that's not going to do it to make a team on the 10K. So it really wasn't until I started clicking off a half marathon in 63 low. I was like, okay, well, maybe this actually is doable if I can put this relative time together in the half that I can in the marathon, then maybe it is feasible. So the Olympic dream didn't really get firing until I would say the Toronto half marathon in 2019, because that's kind of what put me into the mindset of like, okay, I ran 63:08. I just ran with the front group, the top Kenyans that were running the full marathon, but it put it into perspective. Like, okay, maybe this is an option. I can see a path forward where this is actually feasible.
Yeah, I remember seeing you ripping that day. I was watching on the side of that race, and I'm like, who is this guy? Like flying, leading the half marathon by like 5 minutes here, just crushing people. That was pretty cool. You were floating along with the Kenyans there. Pretty badass. You definitely stood out like a sore thumb in that group, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of like, that was honestly my first real crack at the half marathon. Earlier that summer, I ran the Vancouver half, but I was completely noob to road racing. It was just like, fresh out of university, honestly, just looking to make prize money on the roads because I never had that opportunity before being in the NCAA. So did that, but then the Toronto was basically my first real half. And I mean, kind of a dream setup for me. I had probably 10 pacers that I could just tuck behind, and they all ran 63 flat through the half. And the way the Toronto course is, I had them for 12 and a half of the 13 miles. So it was a pretty ideal way to kind of knock it out. My first one.
They had the like Kipchoge V going in front of you and everything. It was beautiful.
Yeah, essentially. The only awkward part was I had no idea about anything with the marathon at that point. Like road racing was still a very new thing to me, and I didn't realize how much they actually require their bottles. So the first aid station at 5K, I was like, just jogging along with the side of it, like in that pack, but kind of on the right side. And they all started to like frantically pass over me to their other side to get their bottles. And I felt like I was intruding in their little group at that point. So I learned my lesson. I stayed on the left side of the pack. 'Cause again, I had no idea. I didn't know that they got bottles every 5K at that point. It was like completely new to me. So even that in itself, just like seeing how the dynamics of a race works was super beneficial going into doing a marathon in myself. Watching how the elites run together and utilize each other so early on in the race, even though they are competing against each other. There's almost like a camaraderie that we can race the last 15 minutes if we want, but I mean we can use each other for the first hour 45. So yeah, definitely a lot of lessons learned in that race too.
Yeah, that would be a pretty cool experience. That's awesome. All right, I want to hop into kind of a bunch of the elements kind of around your training and environment that have kind of allowed you to get to the top level and kind of stay here for the last number of years. So talking about kind of your training environment first. So you had mentioned BC Endurance Project there. So why did you choose that coach and team to work with, and when did you start working with them?
Yeah, I started working with them would have been late 2019. So I graduated university from Tulsa earlier in the year, whatever the spring session is, May 2019. Kind of just, like I said, got into a couple of road races just for fun. Wasn't really wasn't intending on running, but as things kind of spiraled, I started to look at some different options in terms of coaches. And obviously I was pretty keen on staying in Canada at the time. And I think there's a good handful of options, but there's not like hundreds of
Mhm.
options, at least on the market right now that I know of. And yeah, I mean, it was in terms of fit, I think we train very similarly, or he writes the programs very similar to how I picture marathon training is. So I think that is very cohesive. And I think we have the same kind of mentality going into races. And so we seem to be a good match in terms of actual workouts and race strategy, and even just structuring seasons and all that. I think it kind of works perfect. And the other benefit is Rich kind of always has a good group around him as well. So I've always got some training partners. When I started, there was a good group of probably 5 or 6. It's dwindled down now to just a couple, maybe 3 or 4. But yeah, it's kind of been a dream little group that we've had going, and it's definitely worked for me.
So was there a lure at times, like as you were looking around for kind of teams there to jump into one of those, or did you have chats with some of those like bigger sort of US programs?
Yeah, it's quite competitive to get into those. Even definitely before I ran standard, no, I was, like I said, I was really enjoying the training with Rich, and everything was going great. After I hit standard, Rich even said, you got to explore your options. Not going to be any hard felt or any hard uh, emotions against me or anything if I choose to go and join a big group or anything. But there's a lot of logistics behind that. I was living with my longtime girlfriend at the time, so it's okay if I move to the States, then does she move to the States too? She doesn't have a work visa. It's like this whole thing that you start to unravel, and the logistics become quite challenging. And so that's kind of where I landed, is sticking with Rich. It works. I enjoy it. I enjoy the group. I enjoy him as a coach, but then also I was able to get a partnership with Lululemon as an ambassador. So the kind of tandem of that was that I'm able to train wherever I want in Canada. I don't have to be associated with, a team that's in a specific
Mhm.
location. I can stay with my coach, and it's a great brand too. So it was kind of a win on all sides, and definitely happy with the way things panned out.
Yeah, it's cool. I haven't seen too many like big athletes that are sponsored by Lulu. Talk a little bit about that kind of partnership, and are they looking to dive a little further into the running game?
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely fantastic. I love the brand itself. I love obviously the product is next to none. So in terms of that, I've always been happy with it. I think you definitely saw Lululemon step into the elite side of athletics, partnering with the COC in terms of being, they took over HBC, or sorry, yeah, Hudson's Bay Company for the product for the Team Canada now, and I think that's just kind of slowly started the ambassadorship program on the elite side of running itself. We've got a bunch of really great athletes right now. Even just two just won the USA trials. Nikki Hiltz in the 1500
Yeah.
and Tara Davis in the long jump, and we got Hunter Woodall at the World Para Championships. Colleen Quigley's been on multiple
Mhm.
uh, Olympic teams and national teams for the US. So we've got a really great group, and I've only mentioned a few of them. There's definitely more as well. So I think it's a small but mighty group, and I think we're still building and gaining traction. Just trying to show off our team.
Yeah, man, I've always loved Lulu stuff, so it's so cool to see them like finally making more of an effort in the endurance game. Like now you go to like we're big into the triathlon scene, so we go to like Ironman expos now and you see like Lulu all over there and stuff too. So it's like cool to see that Lulu is making a splash and seeing the value in endurance as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking of triathlon, I know they picked up Lionel Sanders as well on the
Yep.
Ironman side. So yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, even I forgot about one of the big hitters. They just brought on Damian Warner as well, just fresh after Tokyo. So I could go on and on. It's not only about athletics. We've got a lot of different ambassadors that are great in the community and stuff too. But I think just in terms of high hitting elite athletes, we're doing quite well, or the company is doing quite well in terms of bringing in an inclusive environment, and then also pretty heavy hitters on the international scene.
Exciting stuff for Lulu. Pumped. So just jumping a little bit back to your training environment there. So I know you guys are based out of Vancouver, but do you spend a bunch of time doing like training camps? You've mentioned Flagstaff a bunch. Do you guys jump down there a bunch in the winter? Not that BC really gets much of a winter over there. Pretty
Yeah.
tame compared to us Ontario folk. But tell me about kind of your flow of the year of where you guys kind of jump to get your elevation or heat training and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the main aspects of why we decided to make the move out here. After university, we moved to Kingston, Ontario for just about 2 years. And then we decided to make the move for a bunch of reasons, but definitely running year round was a key aspect of that. I basically spent one winter in Kingston, and was a lot of treadmill running, a lot of loops around the same hospital because it was the only well paid or well plowed route in
Building the
Kingston. So
grit, the Canadian
yeah.
grit. Come on.
So coming out to Vancouver it's a lot nicer. I can deal with some cold rain throughout a couple months if it means the footing's clear at least.
Yeah.
So that's number one. I mean, I have my home base is trainable year round. I have a good training group. My coach is local here. I think it's set up quite well here. But yeah, there is also the opportunity to go to training camps. I think the easiest one for altitude for North Americans is Flagstaff, especially for running. There's other options I know, but I think kind of the mecca has been for a long time Flagstaff. So I've been fortunate to be able to do a couple camps there. I did it go leading into marathon project. I did it leading into the Tokyo Games, and also going into Tokyo Marathon this year. But that one obviously didn't pan out as much. But it's pretty easy to get up there. A little costly, that's for sure. But
Mhm.
other than that, it's quite nice to train up there.
Yeah, definitely jealous. Those are two of the best spots around. Dang. All right, jumping into some of your training. I'd love for you to run us through like what kind of a sample week of your marathon training looks like. I know you're doing like a double today, or most of your weeks pretty similar. Maybe you could run us through what kind of a regular week looks like for you.
Yeah, we definitely build. I would say our normal marathon build is about 14 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. It depends on what the fitness is like going into the build. Ideally, we're in pretty good 10K half marathon shape going into a marathon build, so that it's really just a focus on getting time on the feet at that point, rather than trying to get fast, like the cushion side and time on the feet, because you can kind of run into problems there in terms of overtraining and just feeling dead every single day. So when we build into the marathon, it'll probably be somewhere in the 110 to 120 miles a week. I work off miles just because I went to university in the States, but
oh no, we've lost them.
I'm starting to learn the metric system a little bit better, because in high school I was off minutes, and then in university we went straight to miles. So I never really had the kilometers as a training solution. So anyways, I'll be doing a lot of talking in miles for my training. But 110 to 120 miles a week is usually what I'll hit for my peak training session. I think my biggest week ever was 125. And that'll typically be 2 interval sessions and a long run. And usually the long run has some sort of intervals built into it, whether it's 10 to 20, maybe even 25K of marathon pace efforts, but built into interval based. And then the intervals sessions, typically maybe a Tuesday, Friday session or something like that, would be some shorter intervals. So maybe it might be 20 by 400 is a pretty key workout for us. So it's still a lot of volume in terms of you get, 8K on the track, if not more than that. But we're able to hit faster paces than just marathon pace, because you can get quite stale if you're only doing marathon pace workouts, or even just like lower threshold sessions. So we'll have like kind of shorter intervals, longer intervals, whether that's Ks or miles or something in between. And then usually a long tempo session every other week or something like that. And a tempo session would be maybe 12, 15, 18 miles as you progress through the marathon build. And that's meant to be, I really focus on those long tempo sessions to be like a race simulation. So it's eat the same thing I would on race day in the morning, wake up at a normal time that I would as if it's a race day, make sure my fluids and my bottles are all prepped and ready to go, and really try and mimic, like, this is race day. How is this pace going to feel? And you're able to get a lot of data points going into a race to formulate a race plan and see if your goals are attainable at the time. So it's a good check-in for those kind of workouts.
So are you someone on those training days that just kind of like, are you up early most days with an alarm for your certain workouts, or are you just someone who just kind of wakes up when the body says it's time and then kind of get to work from there? I imagine with a team, sometimes you have somewhat scheduled sort of times.
Yeah. Like my team, we mainly only meet for workouts, but there's so many runners in Vancouver that half the time I'm meeting up with someone for a run anyways, for easy runs. I've done both, to be honest, on pretty structured, go to bed at 8:45 at night and wake up at 6, and like that's my routine, and that has worked out quite well for me. I typically do that when I'm on training camp and don't have other people in the house and dealing with life in general. So that becomes a lot easier if I'm just at a training camp alone and I can just do my own thing. But then, there's definitely pretty big, it's advantageous to just let your body tell you how much sleep you need. So I've done a mixture of both, and I don't know, I think both work. It's just a matter of what's your life stage at that point.
Totally. Yeah. We've definitely found from the people we've kind of interviewed on this podcast that a lot of them definitely, if they have the option to, they kind of like that internal clock to wake them up. And some days that's 5 a.m. and some days that's 10 a.m. and the training and where they're low at kind of dictates that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, like when I'm, like I was saying, if I'm at Flagstaff training camp by myself, as long as my bedtime is routine, I can definitely wake up within the 15-minute window without an alarm. So, I'm a go to bed quite early kind of person. So it's easier for me to wake up early naturally if I can get to bed by 9 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah, we're definitely on team early bed as well. 8:30, 8:39-ish to bed, 5 a.m. up and get it done before work.
For sure. I definitely see the benefits of that.
Yeah, yeah, especially when we got full-time gigs to deal with. It you got no option. If you don't get it done early in the day, then the can get derailed as the day goes along. So
For sure.
so if you around some of that training stuff, so that's obviously you're running close to some of those weeks, 180, 200K a week. Um, and there's a fair amount of quality in that as well. Have you found some things that either work or don't work for you over the last number of years, whether it's like from that quality or mileage approach where you've started to maybe run into some problems and had to change your approach?
Yeah, I think, fortunately, there's other than this little blip earlier in this year, the injury side of things, I've been pretty resilient to. So that's never really been too much of a factor on me. But I definitely, there's things that definitely work for me to get the legs prepped for a big session or something like that. If, I still have to run to average 120 miles a week, the average day is still 15 to 20 miles a day. So you still have to get that mileage in, but there's ways to do it in order to get the aerobic benefit, but not necessarily trash your legs while you're doing it, or trash them just enough that you're not sacrificing the workout the next day. Yeah, I'm honestly, seems weird, but I'm a big advocate of running on like turf fields or
Mm-hmm.
nicely manicured soccer fields. Not every run, but I try and hit an equal amount of surfaces throughout the week. So, if I'm doing a 25-mile long run on asphalt and I've got 2 track workouts already, I might do some of my long runs in some softer trails and some of my easy runs on turf fields, for example. And I think having a good mixture of surfaces just allows your body to adapt a little bit more. You're not, thrashing your legs on asphalt the entire time. And it looks funny on Strava when you just see like millions of circles around turfs and a couple X's and stuff. But I don't know. I find it kind of therapeutic to just get your run done on one single turf field, and I don't know. I quite like it.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's one thing we've definitely gathered from a lot of, especially the distance runners. We've had like Natasha and stuff on here before, and that's
Mhm.
one of the big take homes is like get off the road as much as you can. Because like, yeah, when you guys are logging that many Ks, holy, that extra impact definitely adds up over the course of weeks and months. And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, there's benefits to it too.
Hmm.
The name of the game is you're running, you're racing on asphalt, so
Yeah.
your legs have to be used to it. So I'm definitely not an advocate of 90% of your running being on soft surfaces, because I
Yeah.
think you're just asking for your legs to become a little bit um, not used to the hard impact. But I think as long as you have a lot of stimulus of especially workouts on harder surfaces, you might as well take your easy days a little bit easier, and just let your body actually recover.
And are you someone that adds a fair amount of cross training at all? Like we had Natasha on and she did like 2 days a week where she was doing her like elliptical stuff, or do you integrate much like biking or cross training with an elliptical, anything like
Not a
that?
whole lot of like endurance cross training, for example, but I have a weight trainer as well, so definitely in the gym at least twice a week,
Nice.
to do strength and conditioning on that side. And then my kind of cross training is more focused around mobility. So usually twice a week, I'll try and make sure I'm doing my mobility drills and just keeping loose. So that's how I kind of see cross training. It's like I get all of my aerobic benefits and even anaerobic benefits from running itself. And then I take the strength and conditioning and mobility and kind of recovery process as my secondary.
Yeah. So when you're going to the gym there for strength stuff, what are some of the like key movements that you're working on there?
Yeah, definitely. I have very tight glutes and quite weak glutes at the point, as well. So definitely something I work on constantly. So a lot of hip movements, hinges, and whether that's squats or lunges or step up, step downs, kind of building in that into the circle, because it's definitely something I've noticed as I've progressed in the marathon training and at the end of marathons and that kind of last 10 or 5K of the race. I noticed that I'm losing that pop in my step. So that's definitely something I'm building on, is trying to build some endurance strength on those kind of muscles that really help me keep form when things start to get tough and tired. I can keep proper form and not lose control on my body there. Because you start doing that, then you start moving funky, you start getting cramps in the stomach and all that kind of stuff. So it's really the whole process of my thoughts on what strength conditioning is for is, can I stay like I normally run if I was going out for an easy 10K? Can I do that for the last 5K of a marathon? And that's the target for me on strength conditioning.
Nice. And jumping back a little bit to that cross training part, because I can't comb over this because I had seen it when you had an injury going, but I feel like you got some bike potential there with that 20-minute FTP test. You had done it like 5.8 watts per kilo. What was going on with that? What a monster.
Completely, I have no idea what that means. I'm completely new on biking. That was just I had access to a Peloton bike at the time. So that was kind of my way, because the weird thing with this injury that I had earlier in the year was I could do pretty much everything except for running. I could bike, elliptical, row, lift weights. Nothing brought on the pain other than running for about 20 minutes. So yeah, I turned to biking a little bit. Again, have no idea what that means. I will say that number is probably inflated, because that was like I was peaking for Tokyo Marathon. So that was like peak aerobic shape. I was in the best shape of my life, and I used that on a 20-minute FTP test. So, I can say I got that number, but can I replicate that at any given time? Probably not.
And have you been following the Tour de France at all? We got our boy, former 4-minute miler, Mikey Woods, who got a big win yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not super involved in watching the tour, but I've definitely, I mean, it's pretty hard to not see that he absolutely smashed it there. And part of my training partner, Justin, is one of the coaches for Mile to Marathon. And
Yep.
it's kind of close, tight knit community here in Vancouver. So I know a lot of the folk that work with the Mile to Marathon, and obviously Mike Woods was one of the co-founders there. So it's definitely been a pretty big hype since the big win.
Well, we obviously want to see you crush it in all things marathon, but hey, you always got cycling as a backup if those numbers are legit.
Yeah.
Love it. Another topic, obviously, people are very passionate about is kind of around like fueling and nutrition. So, what's kind of your philosophy around like day-to-day nutrition stuff? Are you somebody that really tracks what they're eating a lot, or is it just more of an arms race to see how much food you can get into sustain
Yeah,
all that work you're doing?
for sure. Yeah. I think for me personally, it's am I eating enough to sustain? Like, I don't want to be nutrient deficient at any point. So personally, I don't count calories. I don't really keep track of anything. My kind of philosophy, as long as I'm eating generally a well-balanced diet, I'm not going to shy away from desserts or the sugar or anything like that. I mean, there's undeniably, like, there's going to be some proof that you should aim towards some healthier sugars, like if you're going to eat some fruits and stuff like that rather than some ice cream. But I'm definitely not one to shy away from the ice cream either. Like I said, I think everything in moderation is my go-to. I think it's the best theory that I've heard in terms of nutrition. Everyone's got their own thing that they can do, but personally, I don't really keep track of it. As long as I'm feeling full and feeling like ready to run in the morning, for example, I think that's even just a good indicator. It's like, am I feeling absolutely trashed after what should have been a relatively easy session? Then probably an indication that either recovery has gone bad or I'm not fueling my body properly.
And going into races, are you someone that has a pretty like dialed in like carb load going into those? Are you trying to hit like certain hundreds of grams of carbs leading into those? And do you work with like a sports nutritionist through a bunch of this?
I have in the past. I wouldn't say I necessarily, because I don't track anything initially, it's pretty hard to like all of a sudden start to dial that in. It's like I have no reference on what my current carb intake is. So I just kind of consciously try to uptake the carbohydrates leading into a race. Whether that's just adding, an extra portion of pasta or bread going in. But also, I think it's my pre-race nutrition or my nutrition going into a race or even into a big workout it's pretty staple, just like your average carb, your average protein, and some vegetables. Like, I'm not trying to invent the wheel here, but I think I also try and stay away from the like, oh, I gotta have my chicken and pasta with carbonara, like, whatever you're having. I think leading into the superstition kind of thing, you're asking yourself for failure when you show up to a race and they don't have exactly what you're looking for. And then it's already in your head, like, oh, I didn't have my favorite meal, like my stomach's going to be all messed up. So I try not to be like, I need this in order to succeed. I just, as long as I have something that works in the area, and, I'm not trying to have a curry the night before a race, and, I think you can find success in many ways.
And when we talk about like in workout or in racing fueling, what kind of is your strategy there? Do you have like go-to products that you use? And is that a little more dialed in terms of like certain limits that you're trying to hit per hour or per
Yeah.
kilometer sort of through there?
Yeah, I think that definitely takes more of a scientific approach. I've flip-flopped a little bit on the exact brand that I've been using. I started off using Science and Sport, mainly because, especially when I was new into the marathon, I was not a fan of like taking in carb drinks, like sugary drinks, whether it was Science and Sport or Morton or Gatorade, whatever it was. Like, I felt like I needed to like cleanse my mouth with water after. So that's where I opted towards gels, where I could, take a gel. If I know I'm coming up to an aid station, let's say the aid station's at 5K at like 4,700, I'll take my gel, take that down, and then I'll grab a water and rinse it down and make sure I get in the fluid. So that was always my routine. I've started to move towards the Morton products now. So I do find the Morton 160 a lot more palatable than a lot of the other sugary drinks. So I've started to experiment doing gels and Morton 160 and incorporating some actual water in there too, just so that I can mix it up a little bit. And I think, the best in the world are using it right now. So it's pretty hard to deny that it's working. So like I said, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to make sure it works for me.
And are you trying to hit like a certain carb per hour, like during the marathon there?
Yeah, I've experimented trying to push it up into the 70, 80 grams per hour. I run into a little bit of stomach issue when I'm at that point, but I've found that I've been able to sustain energy levels at the 40 to 60. If I can hit 50 grams of carbs per hour, I'm generally pretty safe. So honestly, the issue for me is making sure that I'm staying on top of the water aspect and the electrolyte aspect, because I'm not I can't just like chug water. I've seen a couple people that can like take down 500 mils of Morton in one go. I'm like, I just can't. I'm like max 200 mils, maybe 300 on a hot day, as needed. But I'm definitely opt towards the less water, or like the least amount of water possible, in order to not run into dehydration on the back half of it. But part of that science is just doing it in practice. Like, even yesterday we had a scale out at practice and tracking what we were weighing in beforehand, tracking what we took in terms of fluids and carbs, and then weighing in afterwards, just to make sure that we're at least sustainable. So just dialing in things like that, just to make sure that your sweat rate is, or your intake is applicable for what your sweat rate is.
So what do you use for like your sodium top ups there? Using like sodium pills, or do you add it like to the water?
For me, it seems to be that Morton has enough to level me out. So if I'm
Okay.
taking exclusively Morton products, I'm not a very salty sweater, so
Okay.
I'm okay with that side of things. But what I'll try and do is, especially the night before and the morning of, like if I'm driving to practice or something like that, I'll take a bottle of water with a electrolyte tablet in it,
Nice.
just so that I can top up any levels going into the run. Because I think as long as I'm topped up going into the run or race or whatever it is, then I don't seem to run into problems.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Morton is pretty low on the sodium contents, but if you're not a salty sweater and you're doing the good preload, definitely can see how you could manage through on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And any like key supplements that you take like on the day to day that that kind of keep you rolling?
No, I'm honestly quite natural in terms of just like I try and get all my nutrients from food. There's not really anything other than maybe when I'm at altitude, I'll take on some iron and vitamin C while I'm doing that. But on a day to day, especially here in Vancouver, I don't really take any supplements.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Everybody has a different approach when it comes to supplements. Some people are like so in, they're like, I need my 2 pills of magnesium before bed every night, or I will not sleep.
Yeah, no, I haven't really run into that need yet. I don't, it's I think there's the thing with me is I read, I was even listening to a podcast with it was Cameron Worth. Have you heard of the
Yeah, on
Ironman
Rich
athlete?
Roll.
Exactly, and he
Yeah,
was
we're big
talking
fans
about,
of Cam Murphy. He's awesome.
yeah, a great guy, and he was just ranting and raving about the ketones at the time.
Yeah.
And I looked into it, and obviously there's companies, the ones that he was promoting, that say it works and everything, but in terms of like actual scientific evidence, there's not a lot out there right now. So it always, all of these new fads in terms of nutrition always seem to lead to, if you actually look up the scholarly articles and the research being done, it's either inconclusive or no research has been done on it. So I always kind of lean back to that. It's like, well, is it worth the cost for me? Because I mean, geez, you look at those ketone things, it's like $80 for 3 doses. I'm like,
Yeah, it's
okay, I'm
nuts.
not trying to invest in that if there's no actual impact on it. Not saying that it doesn't work. I'm just saying I haven't felt like I've needed it at this point.
Yeah, you'll wait for a sponsor to come to you first if you're going to be taking in 3 of those a day.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are wild. Yeah, I've been very intrigued by that. I've never tried them myself, mostly because just the costs, they're so cost prohibitive, but definitely an interesting one. I'm following that research closely because I have had a couple of my athletes who are like, should I be buying these like ASAP? I'm like, well, if you have unlimited income, then go fire away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's all the research I saw. It was like none of the articles said it didn't work.
Mhm.
Basically, every single conclusion was we need more research to be done on this to find any sort of conclusion. So I think it's just very early in the science thing. Maybe it will become a quite popular thing to do. Who knows?
Yeah, at the top level, you definitely see like just even watching the tour, you just see them like pull out these times a couple times in the stages. So it's interesting when the top level people are doing it. It definitely gets a buzz going.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of gear stuff, what's your kind of shoe lineup looking like in kind of a day to day? Do you have a bunch of pairs you rotate through, and what are kind of your go-to like workout and racing shoes?
Yeah, honestly, quite agnostic on the footwear side of things. Being sponsored by Lululemon, it kind of affords me to kind of wear whatever shoe I want on the day. I definitely lean to some brands specifically. I've recently got a pair of the new Puma shoes and been wearing Saucony recently. A couple different brands I've tried on in the past little bit. Honestly, I like to rotate. I think it actually is quite helpful to just on the
Mhm.
foot and trying out different shoes and just changing up your foot strike and changing up your footwear in itself. Is quite helpful. So I try not to get stuck on one specific shoe. But yeah, I feel like most brands are pretty competitive now. Asics I've been wearing as well every now and then. But yeah, I think I'm not super set on one specific one. I've been trying out the Puma one recently, and we'll see. We'll see if it gets the call for World Champs. I haven't
Yeah,
made
I
that
was gonna say
decision yet.
which shoe is it gonna be for the world champs? Maybe some Meta Speeds or the Pumas, maybe it sounds like are the final two.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't gotten a pair of those new on ones yet, so I'll have to give those a
Mhm.
try maybe. And yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I feel like most companies have their kind of bread and butter shoe now, and I think it is quite dependent on the athlete on what works for them.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it right now is like all the brands seem to have kind of caught up to like a solid level that you can try the kind of the super shoe across any number of 4 or 5 different companies and not really be behind where it was that whole Nike war in the early part of a couple years ago at that US trials where there a couple of those people had like the Nike super shoes and some didn't, and it's like, oh man, that could have made the difference of an Olympic team. That's crazy.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it is good that things have caught up, and
Yeah.
I think in terms of they finally put out the regulations in terms of stopping companies from just becoming out of control. Obviously important to keep the integrity in the sport. So I think it's like you said, I think it's leveling out. There's still undeniably, I think a lot of people still wear Nikes for justifiable reasons. They obviously work. So everyone's got their go-to, I guess.
Yeah, it was good they did put a cap on it at some point, or we were all going to be running on stilts within the next year or two.
Exactly.
Kind of a very random thought on there, but we were kind of talking about it earlier of like kind of the Canadian qualification process. Do you like the Canadian qualification process, or would you like that like kind of 1 day throwdown that some of the US trials does?
Yeah, I just don't know if just off sheer size, if we have the depth yet to, or I don't know if we ever will, to be honest. I mean, they've got way more people, way more elite runners just based on sheer population size. So the tough part about running just a strict trials in Canada is that we're just playing a numbers game. If one or two, even one of our elite athletes is injured at the time, like that puts a pretty big dent in our field. So I think the hybrid approach that we did in Tokyo or for Tokyo was pretty nice. I think like we had one auto spot from the Toronto Marathon, which was our national championship, and basically two at-large spots based off of points or standard, and then the committee kind of got to choose on that side. The hybrid solution I think was good. It, the pandemic obviously threw a little bit of a wrench in that, but Trevor and Dana were obviously very well deserving, and they both ran standard in itself. So it's not like they were odd people out, but yeah, we're leaning towards more of a, there's not really an auto spot this year from a national standpoint. The only auto spot is top 8 at this year's world championship. So if one of us are top 8 at world championship, then we get the auto spot if we have the standard or if we're selectable. So there's a whole bunch of, the whole selection thing is like a whole bunch of, well, if this happens, then this happens. And then we're playing the game of the politics and where you should race and how you should race and what time you need to hit and all of that. So, you can get really bogged down in it. I'm just like, run as fast as you can. If you can't hit standard, run it a couple times and, put your name in the hat. And that's pretty much all you can do at this point.
Yeah. So when was the starting period for running the standard, and do you have it yet, or you're gonna have to target either getting it at world champs, which is always fun to do in 30 degrees in the middle of summer, or do you have to do one kind of later to hit standard?
Yeah, no, I don't have standard yet. It started in January 1st of this year. It goes through until I think April of next year. So yeah, the new standard's faster. It was 2:11:30 for Tokyo, and it's 2:08:10 now. So it's quite fast for auto standard. So right now, Cam Levins is the only one with auto standard, only Canadian rather. So yeah, there's kind of those two spots up for, I mean, not Cam's pretty well a shoe-in, but he hasn't been officially selected. But there's pretty well two spots left for people to hit standard or be in the quota of points on the World Athletics to be selectable. So yeah, basically have this the rest of this year and then a couple months in the new year to try and either hit standard or accumulate enough points that we're selectable. And then it's not only that you're competing with everybody in the world to be in the quota, you're also got to be top 3 in the country. So like I said, you can get quite bogged down in it. It can become quite overwhelming. And there's obviously, you know who's in the mix right now, but there's probably going to be dark horses in the fall that try and come out and take a swing at it. So you can only control what you can control. And that's kind of my mentality going into it is, like you said, it might be a little lofty to go for standard in the heat of Budapest, but I think even just competing in that top field and targeting as high a place as possible will set me up nicely for the fall to try and give a crack at standard.
Love it. So do you kind of have a bit of a like mock schedule that you've started to map out to kind of give you some race options leading up to that?
Yeah.
If you can share it all.
Yeah. With Worlds being kind of late August, I wanted to push the next marathon quite late into the year. So whether that's in December or January or probably try and hit somewhere in there, because then that gives me enough time. That's still, even like December is a bit quick, so it's going to be
Mhm.
interesting. But I think there's a lot of races in kind of early December through early January that are good options. So that's probably going to be the target.
Are those like ones like CIM and Valencia and stuff like that that kind of come later in
Correct.
the year?
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the new year, there's Houston as well, which
Oh
is
yeah.
usually fast half, but it's decent in the marathon. I don't know. It depends on year to year. So yeah, there's options. I think Valencia is a great option. I raced that in 2021 as well. So that's definitely on the radar.
Sweet. So as we wrap things up here, obviously eyes are kind of solely focused on Paris for next year, but kind of beyond that, what are some things that really get you excited beyond like kind of Paris? What is that, 2024 coming up? What other things are you looking at kind of that gets you excited in endurance in your career? Like you see guys like Reed Coolset who are into ultra stuff. Is there any things that really kind of excite you for future down the line?
Yeah, I haven't really, obviously, like you said, the big target right now is Paris, and that's taking a lot of my athletic side of terms of mental prep. Haven't really thought a whole lot on what it looks like after Paris. I think I'm kind of in the realm of the top teams I can hit right now in terms of, if I'm going to stay on the marathon, the name of the game is either world champs or Olympics, and those kind of cycle through different years. So um, after 2024, you'll have the 2025 world champs, for example. So there's always a team and always a carrot that you could chase. And I'm not like, I don't mind going chasing a team for cross country or something like that. I really don't think I'll be chasing a team on the track anymore. But I'll say never say never. But it's probably a pretty unlikely one that I'll be trying to run a track 10K, or the 5K is pretty much out of question for me, anyways. But yeah, I don't know. And honestly, in the future, I work probably 30 hours a week in engineering as well right now too. So I try and keep a balance and keep everything balanced so that in the future I do have things to look forward to. So I'm excited to continue my career in engineering too. I think it's I enjoy the balanced aspect of having work and athletics and life, and it gives me something where if I have a bad workout, I can just work on the computer and stuff like that. Or if I'm having a boring day at work, I can get out for a run. So having the kind of two aspects to my work career is quite nice.
Yeah, it's cool. You've kind of found struck that balance. We had Ben on Flanagan, and he had talked about how he had a full-time job for a bit, but ended up going full-time on the running side of things. So it's interesting to see people kind of go back and forth between the two to find kind of what works the best for them.
Yeah, for sure. I think everyone's got their own thing and what works for them. I just personally like to stay stimulated in terms of not just getting home from the run and trying
Yeah.
to take a 4 hour nap before I have to run again. So yeah, it works for me, but it's definitely not for everyone. And some people find a lot of success in diving straight into the athletics and only being a professional athlete. It's obviously working for Ben Flanagan. So
Yeah. Working for you as well, my friend. Cool. So final question as we wrap up here, one we ask all of our guests is, we brought you on because you're one of our endurance icons, but who is your endurance icon?
yeah, it's kind of funny. I've grew up watching Cam Levins race, and he's obviously taken his marathoning to a next level while I'm in the sport now. So it's interesting watching him really exponentially grow into that. And I think it kind of paves the way for our marathoners. But even looking previously, you mentioned Reed Coolsat or even Eric Gillis. I kind of
Mhm.
grew up in the area of Guelph and trained in a similar training group to where they were based in their bulk of their marathon careers. So I think just the marathon scene in itself, just watching the progression throughout the years, like Reed and Eric were on the forefront of marathoning in Canada for so long, and you can put Dylan Wykes in the mix there. And I think just not really understanding what the marathon was, I don't think I had full respect for what they were doing at the time. But
Mhm.
I think it definitely puts it into perspective on the work that they did and the path that they've paid for Canadian marathoners going into this next decade, for example.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah, they definitely made a huge impact and are probably a huge reason of why we're making these big strides going forward. So great choices. I have some of my favorites as well in there. So
For sure.
nice one. All right. And what is the best way for people to follow along with your journey as you go to World Champs coming up and go on the hunt for Paris next year?
Yeah, no, you mentioned I'm on Strava. I tend to post pretty much all of my training on Strava. I took a little break during the injury part. It was honestly the first time in probably 3 or 4 years that I stopped posting on Strava. But yeah, I'll be posting all my training on Strava. And I mean, in terms of socials, I'm mainly on Instagram. So keep me accountable. I'm supposed to be. My girlfriend or fiance always says that I should be posting more about the training and running and all that. So I got to stay accountable with sharing that.
It's all that balance, man. You got enough training plus 30 hours of a job. It's you got to hire a social media manager or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Love it, man. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and pumped to follow your journey, and best of luck at World Champs in 6 weeks. Go crush it.
Awesome. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
Wow. How great was that? I always learn so much from these endurance icons. If you enjoyed the podcast as well, please consider liking us across social media, subscribing to us on YouTube, or giving us a 5-star rating on wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate you and your support so much. We wish you happy training, and we'll see you back next week.